Arancioni.
So I've just finished a year on DuoLingo learning Italian, and to celebrate I thought I would do a master study of one of Italy's most famous painters, Titian, his self-portrait from 1567. And just quickly I thought I'd say that I'm in no way sponsored by DuoLingo. These are my own thoughts and feelings, and yeah, let's get into it. Okay, so what is DuoLingo? It's hard to believe anyone in 2025 doesn't know what DuoLingo is, but just in case. DuoLingo is a language learning app that offers a pretty huge variety of languages to learn. How it works is you complete these little 5-minute lessons that gradually introduce you to the language of your choice. There are a few different types of lessons, including spoken and listening exercises. And the main gimmick of the app is a focus on daily streaks, which you obviously gain by completing a lesson every day. They have these things called freezes, which allow you to miss a day, but you only get so many for free before you have to pay for them. And gee whiz, doesn't DuoLingo love to ask you for money. The pretty consistent and constant advertising is probably my main gripe with the app, but it's not too bad considering the app is free and you can play it for free. And that word play is probably pretty appropriate because it does feel quite like a mobile game. You know, there's an in-app currency, and you actually have a daily limit of mistakes you can make before you lose a life. And in typical mobile game fashion, you can purchase more lives with microtransactions. But something DuoLingo does really, really well, and why I think they've set themselves apart from other language learning apps, is their marketing. Their social media team is pretty slick. Basically, they hit the millennial Gen Z style of humor pretty hard, which is to say they just generally act a bit quirky online. The comments they leave under their official account are pretty memorable, but they're also well renowned for heavily guilting users into coming back to the app. So why have I been using the app? Well, I guess the marketing worked. I was thinking about learning a language and just went with the one I'd heard of. Now, as an Australian, it will come as no surprise that I don't know a second language. It's kind of a small shame being an Australian, in my opinion, where it's very uncommon to be bilingual.
Bilingual? I could only dream of that. I'm a middle-class white Australian male. I'm barely lingual.
Actually, I could only find data from the 2021 census, but that census found that 72% of Australians only spoke English. And part of that can be excused to, I guess, due to the fact that we're just geographically really far away from the rest of the world. But it's the modern day and we're all more connected than ever. And I personally think it's something we really should embrace. Because with learning languages, we learn more about each other, more about our fellow man. And actually, in a way, I think we learn more about ourselves too, which I'll come back to in a sec. When I was thinking about what language to learn, I had a few choices. I could use my head and go with a practical thing to do, which would maybe be to learn Mandarin, which I learnt for a few years at school, but have since completely forgotten. Or I could choose something completely new, and maybe go with something that spoke to my heart a little bit more. And in the end, my heart won out over my head, and the language I decided to learn was, of course, Italian. But why does Italian speak to my heart? Maybe because I'd love to impress an Italian woman. No, I'm only partially joking there. 50% joking. 45. No, but I'm not totally sure why it speaks to me. I don't think I have any Italian heritage, but I just really love the culture, I think. I love the food, the art, the people, pasta, painting, Ferrari. Oh, Madonna. And actually, now that I think about it, it might be slightly a practical option because I've always had this kind of pipe dream to go and live in Italy for a few months, and a head start on the language actually might be pretty helpful. So overall, my experience was really good. I found it really an enjoyable thing to do. I did have a few gripes with it. Sometimes the lessons could feel very repetitive and a bit annoying, and there are a few instances where DuoLingo's use of AI in their lessons reared its ugly head. I've seen a couple of other people online say the same thing, where they found an exercise that was clearly made by a robot and was either actually wrong or just didn't read particularly well. But overall, I would say it was good. It was a great introduction to a language. And obviously it was just an introduction, because I'm not fluent in Italian. Like, it's not a substitute for better learning practices. Like, if I was to have taken proper lessons in-person lessons, or actually done some type of immersion thing, after a year, yeah, I may well have been close to fluent. But DuoLingo isn't a substitute for that. It's just a fun and easy way to get used to how a language works. Actually, I did notice how much I subconsciously was starting to pick up on. I've been watching some, vlogs and TV shows that are in Italian, and I found it very cool that I could pick up some of it. Obviously not verbatim, but yeah, some of it. Actually, I was in the shops a few weeks ago and I was buying black beans because I was making burritos. And I picked up a can, and it was only when it was actually in my basket that I realized the label said fagioli neri, which I don't know if I just subconsciously read or something. Obviously there was a picture of beans on the tin as well, so maybe I didn't even read it, but it was cool to know that I could read it. And back to what I mentioned earlier about how it's a good way to learn more about ourselves. It was very interesting learning about Latin, which is obviously the root language of Italian, and learning about how Latin influenced English, which the more I learn about the English language, the more I understand how it's an absolute bastard love child of Latin, Germanic languages, French, and a whole bunch of just other stuff. And I now more fully understand why English must be just impossible to learn. I do not envy anyone that has to learn English as a second language. And another way I learnt about my own culture and self, I guess, was learning about how Italian specifically has influenced Australians. A stat I learned recently was that between 1876 and 1976, 25.9 million Italians migrated to Australia. And I guess this past year I've just been more aware and taking notice of how they've had a strong influence on our culture, in our food and kind of relaxed lifestyle, I guess. Actually, a really small example, which is completely my theory and in no way proven factual at all as of yet. But for some reason in Australia, I think it's all of Australia, might just be Queensland, I'm not sure. But we pronounce the colour that's spelt M-A-R-O-O-N as maroon instead of the much more logical maroon. And I've always been confused by it, like it's literally just us. No other English-speaking countries seem to do it, and no one ever seems to have an answer as to why. I thought it was just this kind of, I don't know, frankly uneducated bastardization of the word. Like on the convict ships, we all just forgot how to pronounce the word properly. But you can imagine my surprise and frankly my delight when I was doing my DuoLingo lessons of the day, and I learnt that the Italian word for maroon is marrone. And it makes sense to me that maroon is just a corruption of marrone, which the large Italian immigrant population introduced while our accent was still forming. Anyway, that could be completely wrong, but I choose to believe it's true. Yeah, so in short, it's been fun, and I'd recommend giving it a go. I'm gonna keep my streak of Italian going, but for the next year I'm thinking about learning another language of another country and culture that I'd love to spend time in, and that is French. But in celebration of doing a year in Italian, I'm going to do the outro in Italian. My apologies in advance, and I'll quickly sign off in English first. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. But here we go. Good start. È stato molto divertente imparare l'italiano quest'anno. Grazie per la visione. Alla prossima volta. E ciao. Alright, that was probably terrible.